Sidearm whip, scores!
Now in front, Fennell scores! Paul Rabel splits two and scores!
Kylie O'Miller showing off those shifty skills and finishes that shot behind Liz Hogan.
Kelly, not shy, bounces one home! What a start!
Welcome everyone to Pro Lacrosse Talk. I'm Hutton, he's Adam, and together we are your main source for pro lacrosse news. So this is our first podcast. We started it back in March because we saw a need for a news source solely focused on pro lacrosse. Adam and I both came up with this when we saw that the Premier Lacrosse League was starting out, and MLL obviously was still going strong, and the WPLL is entering its second season, and the NLL is probably doing the best out of all of them. So it's a great time to be a professional lacrosse fan. Do you have anything else to add to that, Adam?
Yeah, no, I'm just really excited to kind of get in the swing of things, to talk about not only the two great men's outdoor leagues, but the WPLL with their rebranding, which is really exciting. Just had a really awesome finish to the indoor NLL Championship last week. So we have a lot to cover.
Yep, absolutely. The NLL is obviously not in season anymore, but we'll start off with the Calgary Roughnecks defeated the Bandits in Game 2 back in May, and they ended up winning their third NLL Championship in a 14-13 win over the Bandits in overtime. They had defeated the Bandits in the Game 1 by a score of 10-7. And so this is their third championship, their first since 2009 when they defeated the New York Titans. And their first championship they won in franchise history was back in 2004, and they ironically defeated the Buffalo Bandits then as well. So we want to just congratulate the Calgary Roughnecks. We'll be talking a little bit about the National Lacrosse League. This offseason, there's an expansion draft coming up with the new teams, the New York Riptide, as well as the new Rochester Nighthawks after the old Nighthawks moved to Halifax to become the Thunderbirds. So there's a lot still going on with that league, and they're the largest and I'd say the most successful of the professional lacrosse leagues out there. So we'll be talking a lot about them. But for our fast break today, I'm just going to go through, the scores from the weekend. So in the inaugural weekend of the Premier Lacrosse League, in a thrilling game, the Archers defeated the Chrome 13-12 in overtime. The Whip Snakes defeated the Chaos also in overtime, 15-14. And then the Redwoods defeated the Atlas 11-9 in another close one. So really great lacrosse from the Premier Lacrosse League the first weekend. Phenomenal job in Boston, and looking forward to more big things in the future. Then on the MLL side, they started out actually last Friday, May 31st, when the Denver Outlaws defeated the Lizards 11-9, and that saw the return of John Grant Jr. out of retirement. He's 44 years old and can still play, so we'll get a little bit more about his coming out of retirement and what his motivations might have been a little bit later. New York Lizards then lost their second game to the Boston Cannons 13-12 in another close one on Saturday, and Sunday the Blaze defeated the Outlaws 14-12 and the Bayhawks defeated the Rattlers 14-11. Now to the WPLL. There's 5 teams in the WPLL. The Brave did not play this weekend, but the Command, Fire, Fight, and Pride all played also at Gillette Stadium where the PLL was. And so on Saturday, the Command defeated the Fire 11-8, and on Sunday, the Fight defeated the Pride 6-4. So that's your fast break. Scores from the weekend. Let's dive in a little bit to some of these games, Adam. What was one of the games that really stood out to you?
I predominantly watched Sunday's game with the Redwoods and Atlas. That was pretty intriguing to me, just with a few Hopkins guys going against one another, and Kyle Harrison of the Redwoods, and Mr. PLL himself, Paul Rabel, taking on his former teammate when they won a championship at Hopkins in 2005. So I thought that was not the most intriguing game to me, but the one that kind of stuck out to me that I paid the most attention to. Awesome battle, kind of back and forth. That one, there's a lot of offense on both of those teams, but it seemed to kind of come down to the goalies. John Kincannon of the Atlas, despite the loss, came up huge in a number of scenarios. And he was a guy that didn't get much playing time with the MLL. He was backing up Austin Cowett with the Florida launch last year, and I think this is going to be his chance. We've heard a lot of good things coming out of training camp that he's been playing really well, and obviously that showed in Game 1. Then on the other side, Troutner.
Timmy Troutner.
Yep, Timmy kind of stood on his head the whole game, and obviously, as a former goalie myself, those are the kinds of games I like to watch. So I was super excited for both of those guys to kind of one, to get their first shot as starters, and two, to play so well kind of for the crowd in Foxborough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another matchup too that was interesting is the master against the student with Trevor Baptiste going up against Greg Beast. That was also a big matchup. They were pretty even. I think Baptiste might have edged him a little bit, but for the most part, it was a really close match. And there's some new face-off rules that we'll touch on a little bit too.
Sure.
I didn't really notice them play that big of an impact though, which I liked. It was I think the rules did a good job to kind of make it a little bit tougher for these Fogos to win the face-off right away, but I think face-off guys still were able to go out and dominate and do a good job, and I think it's kept to the spirit of the game. The game I liked the most, though, had to be the Archers versus the Chrome. The Whip Snakes Chaos was also a phenomenal game, both going to OT, but just the back and forth, the way the Chromes battled in the end just to come back still, I thought was phenomenal. And all the offenses, you can tell, they sped up the game a little bit. The field's a little shorter going in the rules. It's now 100 yards as opposed to 110. Really minor change. I don't think that really affects it too much. You could tell it did speed up the game a little bit going coast to coast, but I think it's a no-brainer because I'm guessing they have a long-term plan. They're going to be playing in a lot of soccer stadiums this year, but in the future, if they play in football stadiums, it makes it a lot easier for them to adapt the field to that. But this game was great. The Archers got off to a 4-0 start. It looked like they were going to pull away. And back to the face-off thing. There's been a lot of controversy around the face-off, particularly when T.D. Erlin this past college lacrosse season dominated the X most of the playoffs. But what I will point out, though, is that these face-off guys aren't just facing off and getting off. I like to say they're facing off and getting one now. A lot of scoring in both college lacrosse and now in the professional lacrosse as well from the face-off X. And so I just think critics, have some valid points in how the face-off is handled, but I think it's here, and I think it's here to stay. You had Connor Farrell out there going out and dropping bodies, as a face-off guy. You had Stephen Kelly with the very first Premier Lacrosse League goal. 11 seconds in, he won the face-off, went down and scored, and put the Archers up by 1. And I think that was, the best way for the Premier Lacrosse League to start is that, hey, the face-off is, it's here and it's here to stay. Yeah, but what are your thoughts too about the face-off and how the PLL is handling it?
Yeah, I was super excited to see kind of what they brought to the face-off X, and I'm obviously a huge proponent of keeping the face-off. We've seen kind of the same talk when it comes to the draws in women's lacrosse as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that 9 times out of 10 becomes a talk because of the competitiveness. No one was talking really about getting rid of the face-off until TD went to Yale, right? And added to an already stacked lineup. And you see it's become such a pivotal part of the game and a super exciting part of the game as well. So I don't see there a reason to get rid of it. I'm super excited what the WPLL and the PLL are doing. And, that so many student athletes and are going pro, and they have the opportunity to kind of find a niche from the face-off X or draws. And, you see the Beast with the face-off academy, or his counterpart on the women's side, Sammy Jo Tracy with the Draw Control Academy. They're doing some really cool things, and it just adds a facet to the game and a uniqueness to our sport that I don't think we should lose. So.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. Tommy Kelly also scored a face-off goal, and he went through the face-off academy with Greg Beast, as he's commonly known as, and he ended up scoring a goal for the Chaos this weekend. And he has an interesting story, too, because he went to UVA and dropped out after his first year and was out of lacrosse for a little bit and ended up making it into the professional league through the MLL, and now he's playing, for the Chaos as their face-off guy, and he had a goal this weekend. So it just goes to show, like you said, it provides these players a secondary, position for them to play, and they're just equally as important.
Absolutely.
So overall, I think what the PLL is doing too, they made some tweaks to the face-off. There's more of space between the crosses of the sticks when they go down. They actually have lines on the field, which I think is genius because you're making it consistent. The ball's already placed down, so it's not an issue of when the referee puts the ball down in between the sticks. They might be going towards another. And they got a lot of feedback from the face-off guys, and they took it to account, and I think a lot of it was, you don't want to change it completely, but I think they made it a little bit more of a 50-50. It's harder to clamp and win it to yourself. Now it's a little bit more of a scrum, and there's even a rule now that actually in the PLL that wing midfielders, whether they're LSMs or regular midfielders, can actually check the face-off guy's stick as they're battling for it. Yeah. So I know some people aren't crazy about that. I'm still on the fence about it, but that is another way that makes it a little bit more of a 50-50 ground ball situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just talking about the lines on the field, taking the players' kind of point of view. I mean, the league's for the players, by the players, right? That's their thing. So it only makes sense that they're going to take what their own players say to make it a more exciting competitive game. So
absolutely. And so back then to the Archers game, phenomenal back and forth game. So the Archers went up 4-0, and then the Chrome started, chip away. They didn't have the lead though until the third when they tied it up 10-10. Ending the third, they went into the fourth, and it looked like there was going to be some more scoring, and it ended up being the Chrome going up 12-10 early in the fourth. But the Archers didn't do much until Marcus Holman's hat-trick goal with 7 minutes remaining was unbelievable. I don't know how he wrapped around the defender. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. It's all over social media, but it was just an unbelievable goal to put them within one. And then they got another goal from Ben McIntosh just inside the arc with a little under 2 minutes left to tie it up and send it into overtime, which is another interesting thing, the addition of the 2-point arc, which is in MLL, but they put it a yard closer, so it's 15 yards now. But we didn't really see many of those. We saw one from, I believe, Schreiber in the Archers game, but for the most part, it wasn't really a factor, and we'll see if it becomes more of a factor as the games progress. But then in overtime, Gutterding unleashed a shot that barely hit off the pipe, ironically with a UVA goalie in Adam Gittleman, so that was, I thought, a little irony there, knowing that UVA got that controversial goal awarded to them that hit the post. But Will Manny, who unleashed the game-winning goal, a snipe to the top corner to put the Archers up in the first ever PLL game, and it was a great game. And going off of that, I think the most fun thing about the broadcast was listening to the players, being able to talk to the broadcasters during the game, and having them mic'd up, on the sideline and even in the game too, which was really hasn't been done before in another sport, let alone just lacrosse. It hasn't been done in any professional sport. So that was a really cool thing to add to the game.
Absolutely, and we talked about that shot off the post with Gittleman, and it's going to be kind of just the storyline I'm looking at is in terms of players that were starting in the MLL and ended up not starting right away for the PLL. So currently, I guess at Gittleman's backup is former Lizard starting goalie Drew Adams, former goalie of the year in the MLL. So I'm really excited to kind of follow some storylines about obviously breakout candidates for rookies in the PLL. Who haven't played professionally before, and also to kind of see any kind of controversies that may ensue when it comes to the cage or the face-off X or kind of all over the field. So I'm really excited to see what the next couple weeks will bring.
No, absolutely. And on the flip side, you had Brett Queener backing up John Galloway, for the Chrome. So that's another established stars in the MLL. But yeah, so definitely some storylines to look for. Follow us on social media, Twitter or Instagram. We're always following, the big name signings and stuff. And there's been a lot of gray area with that. There's been some players that looked like they were going to sign with the MLL that have gone into the PLL pool but haven't been playing. They didn't make the roster. So there's a lot of different things going on with that, which we'll definitely keep you guys updated on. So going back, though, to the hot mics that we got with the players, I want to touch on a little thing that I had an issue with was the NBC Gold streaming on Saturday. Those two games were streamed on NBC Gold. And they were mic'd up and they were unfiltered. You had a lot of F-bombs dropped, which, that's part of the game. It happens. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not going to tell the players to, they need to clean up their language. You and I both played in college, and I'm sure we let our share of curse words fly throughout the game. But I was watching with my younger brothers. The youngest is 9, and I do take exception to them letting that go on air, so I definitely think they need to clean that up, whether it's bleeping it or being very strategic when they do go to the mics, because I know Will Manny let a few of them fly. I don't want these guys to have to watch what they say during a game. It's a heated competitive environment. They shouldn't have to be held responsible for a few curse words but the game is about growing the game at the youth level, and you have a lot of young fans watching, so you want to send the right message. So that's something I'll look to see how the PLL handles that going forward.
Yeah, and I think, as anything currently with the PLL, it's going to have its growing pains here and there, and
Absolutely.
That's one thing maybe they thought about the miking up. And, NFL does a fantastic job with that as well through NFL Films, and that's just something I think they probably use this as a litmus test to see what went well, what didn't, and they're going to use this whole season, obviously, to some extent to see what works and what doesn't. But, I'm curious to see what goes on kind of going forward with that. Maybe there's just a warning or something on the gold subscription that just says warning.
Yep.
They're going to let it rip, so be prepared or something like that. So it's all learning experiences kind of from every side, but I definitely can see where you're coming from on that.
I don't want to do a disservice to the game that followed that game, because the Chaos Whipsnakes was just as good. And the Whipsnakes looked like they were going to roll. But that's the beauty of lacrosse, is it's a game of runs, and it's always back and forth. And the speed of this game with the 50-second shot clock, which is the shortest it's ever been, I believe, in professional lacrosse. You have the 60-second with the MLL. You have 80 seconds with college, and I don't think it was ever shorter than that in the MLL than 60.
I don't believe so.
Yeah. I might have to fact check that, but so 52 seconds is obviously not that much time, but it is still plenty of time, to set up your offense and run it. And so we saw a lot of scoring throughout the day, and a lot of lead changes. The Whipsnakes got off to 4-0 lead, and the Chaos kept hanging around. It was eventually 8-3 at half. And the thing I liked about the Whipsnakes is they got a lot of production from a lot of different people. You had Connor Kelly involved, Matt Rambo, Drew Snyder. So you had a lot of guys.
Jules Henningberg.
Yeah, Jules Henningberg. He had a nasty goal right on the crease where he had at least four fakes or whatever. Had my head spinning. But yeah, so a lot of different guys getting involved.
Even Ben Reeves, who we saw come in late
he had a
last
big
season
game
with the Rattlers, and then obviously coming in late to score a couple this week as well. So that's one thing. Like I said already, it's interesting to see that dynamic of the players that came over from MLL to PLL and kind of vice versa. So
yeah, so the Chaos ended up coming back and tying it up, sending it to overtime, and they must have traded goals, I think, at least 3 or 4 times. I kept checking. I wasn't able to watch the second half. I was only able to watch the first, but I kept checking, and it was 10-10, 10-11, 11-11. It just kept going back and forth until finally it was 13-13, going into a second overtime of the PLL history, and Drew Snyder came up big and scored to make it a 14-13 win for the Whipsnakes. So yeah, some really great games on that first day, and like you said, even the Sunday game was really close too. And I also found it interesting too. So these games did end in overtime, but something to note is they can end in a tie. So the periods in another new rule for the Premier Lacrosse League is they're playing 12-minute quarters, and when they go into overtime, it's another 12-minute period. But that's it. If no one wins in those 12 minutes, it ends in a tie. And I think they probably do that way the scheduling doesn't get backed up. But I don't think we're going to have too much of an issue with ties. I'd be very surprised with how lethal all these offenses are if we have a game ending in a tie. But it can happen. After that, I think if you want to segue into the WPLL, since they played after the Whipsnakes and the Chaos on Saturday, and then they played before the Redwoods and the Atlas on Sunday. Just going off of the attendance, it looked like a lot of people left after the game on Saturday, which was a little disappointing. But then again, you got to know the target audience. It was probably mostly youth males. And then it was a little bit better turnout, I think, at the beginning of Sunday. So I think maybe that might be what they try to do in the future, is maybe lead with the women's and then end with the men's. That way, people who are arriving a little bit earlier get to see the women. We'd love for more fans to come out for the women's game, but the nature of sports is that it does tend to be more male heavy. We're trying to change that, obviously, and the WPLL is doing a great job by partnering with the PLL to change that.
Yeah. So I mean, if anyone's going to stay for a game, that Pride fight game has everything you're looking for when you want to see a competitive women's professional game. I mean, the rosters are actually absolutely stacked. The fight are kind of my odds-on favorite to win it this year. We might do a segment on projecting kind of winners and losers for the season. But, I mean, you name it, they have the names. I mean, whether it's last year's Tualatin winner, Sam Apuzzo, this year's Tualatin winner, and first goalie ever, may I add, Megan Taylor. They have, obviously, the sports, arguably their best player, Taylor Cummings, Kayla Trainer, Laura Lay from Florida. I mean, they are absolutely stacked. And then going against the Pride team that has Alex Aust, Caroline Steele, who just came off a national championship with Maryland, obviously Sammy Jo Tracy, who I already mentioned, and then arguably the best goalie of all time, Liz Hogan, coming out to play for the Pride. I'm so excited to kind of see what they have. The rebranding they just did was super exciting, and obviously I just talked about those two teams, but the other squads are stacked as well since the rosters are smaller with only 5 teams. You know, it's going to be exciting to see what they have to offer kind of through the season. I hope the numbers for fan attendance goes up. May have to do. We kind of talked off air about kind of Boston as a whole. With Foxborough isn't really in the thick of it in terms of fan attendance and whatnot. But I think it'll just be a litmus test to see kind of how things work with them, and they're obviously, like you said, doing a great job with promotion on Twitter, Instagram, and all of those types of things. And similar to the PLL, their players are really doing a great job as well on their individual accounts and whatnot. So I'm excited to see what they have to offer going forward.
No, absolutely, and I think that you saying the rosters are stacked is interesting to note too, because women's lacrosse, they tend to score more goals. It tends to be a little higher scoring, and these scores were 11-8. The Command over the Fire, which is pretty low scoring for women's lacrosse, pretty standard though. And then the Fight held the Pride to 4 goals. 6-4. So it goes to show the talent, not just on the offensive side, but the defensive side as well. Like you said, with Megan Taylor being the first goalie to ever win the Tualatin, these women players are the real deal, and there's such a high volume of them in such small 5 teams that you are going to get really the best competition out there. So we're definitely looking forward to. I know you and I are both going. When they go to Baltimore at Homewood. So that's going to be exciting to watch, because we'll get to watch some PLL games as well as some WPLL games in person. And I'm going to the one in New Jersey next weekend on Sunday, so I'm looking forward to that and kind of getting up close and personal with the PLL. So in my now home state of New Jersey, not originally from here, but now living here, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them at Red Bull Arena.
I'm really excited. We talked about the production of the PLL. The WPLLs you can watch on ESPN Plus now, which is super exciting. And I think I'm such an advocate for the women's game, just my wife playing and a lot of people in our family obviously playing over the years. And it's an awesome game. It just needs to be in front of people, and they'll see why we've loved it for so long and why it's a super exciting sport to watch,
Oh yeah, no, and it's nonstop too. I think the PLL, the professional league, does a really good job of being fast paced. At the pro level, whereas the college game has kind of slowed down on the men's side. But the women's game, it's always fast paced. You don't have these long drawn out possessions, because it's just impossible. With the way the equipment is and the way the fields are and the number of players. It really is back and forth, more so like a soccer or a hockey than people realize. So I agree with you. I think people are really going to start to catch on, and the exposure they're getting on ESPN Plus and ESPN3 I think is great. So it's we'll see where it goes from there. But last but not least, we can't overlook the MLL. I know we have a lot of people that are either in the PLL camp or the MLL camp for their various reasons, and I know you and I are both of the belief that more lacrosse is good for the sport. I think we're really looking at right now the AFL and the NFL of lacrosse. Those 2 leagues back then, people forget, when they were just starting out, they were competing for the best players. They were competing for media exposure. They were going through the same things that the PLL and MLL are going through right now. And obviously we eventually had a merger of equals, and that I don't know what we'll get with this. Push is gonna have to come to shove at some point. Something's gonna give in the next, whether it's the next 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years with these 2 leagues. So I don't think having 2 leagues is sustainable in the long term, but whether there's a merger in the future or we have, an MLL PLL Championship Super Bowl game, who knows? That one can dream, right? The bottom line is right now we had twice as much lacrosse this past weekend than what we've gotten in the past, and I think no one's been really more excited about it than this year because the PLL has, really got people excited about the professional game again. But on the flip side, I think it's really helped the MLL try to, they've had such a stagnant product for the past 4 or 5 years that I think it was like, okay, this is a wake-up call for them. They got to step up their game. Competition breeds the best. And I think, for the most part, they're actually doing a pretty good job with the product on the field. Marketing definitely leaves a little bit to be desired. I think they definitely need to up the ante on that and know, what their audience is because they're still very involved in these youth communities.
Yeah.
Which is something that's overlooked. The PLL goes to these cities one weekend each week. Or 1 weekend each year. So they're only going to these cities once. Whereas these teams that are based in these cities, like the Cannons are, there's a Boston Cannons beat writer, writing for Boston Globe and stuff. Like they have that community aspect to it, and I think that I don't want to say that's overlooked by the PLL. They definitely recognize that, but their tour-based model is definitely a unique approach, and I think it's going to work out for them. But you can't overlook the MLL's strengths as well and being involved in the community. So I think, if they leverage those strengths from a marketing standpoint, they can still compete. And they still got some players. Tell me a little bit about the players that are still in the MLL that I think, don't get enough love. I mean, you got Rob Pennell still on the Lizards. He was actually held to a quiet weekend for the most part. But, Lyle Thompson. I mean, there's guys still out there.
Yeah, and I mean, even the Lizards, I know they lost 2 games, but I mean, Kevin Crawley's on that squad.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of good players still on that team. Austin Kaut, who was runner-up for goalie of the year last year in the MLL. I mean, they brought in a lot of Towson guys. I know we talked about that. Just recently graduated. Arguably now, probably our boy on the Atlanta Blaze this year. He is arguably the best face-off guy now in the MLL.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
It's a super exciting time for them too, and like you said, it breeds success, and I'm excited for the MLL to give some players an opportunity that might not have gotten that last year. So it'll be interesting, like you said, to see what happens with both leagues. But I'm excited for a lot of other players, maybe, especially obviously being D3 guys ourselves. There's some more D3 guys on squads this year.
Yep.
It's exciting time for that league as well. Obviously from the marketing standpoint, kind of leaves your head scratching how they kind of had a draft, right, for college players, and then turns out they folded
3 teams
that literally just drafted, so who were part of the same ownership group, which is obviously kind of a struggle, and you see kind of all over Twitter, Save the Machine, the Ohio Machine have a big outcry, even the Charlotte Hounds,
Mm-hmm.
So from that standpoint, it's tough, but I think the product on the field, it was still a great couple games that I watched over the weekend, and like you said, Lyle Thompson's back, and Phipps in goal for the Bayhawks. They have some strong players, and the league has some strong players still, obviously.
And it's funny too, like you have, like you said, you had some of these Towson guys like Zach Goodridge, also who they chose to sign with the MLL, and I think part of it was probably because the PLL is a little oversaturated right now because they do have what I would argue the better player pool, but you can't overlook the guys that they still have, and you have like a Dylan Malloy who was actually in the PLL player pool, but because of some off the field differences that we don't really know about, but I'm guessing it was probably his job that he possibly wanted to keep. What was the MLL's perceived weakness of having these players be more part-time than professionals is now kind of being seen as a strength, because if you're a guy that is coming out of college and maybe you just don't want to play professional lacrosse full-time, on that salary, because the PLL, what they're doing is great, giving them benefits and full-time wages, but let's be honest, the full-time wages still don't compare to other professional sports in the slightest. So if you're a guy coming out of college and you have the opportunity to get a good paying job 9 to 5, but you want to play professional lacrosse, you can still do that in the MLL. And I think that's probably why some of these guys chose that, because they're only going to a few cities during the summer rather than touring the whole country. So I think that is kind of an advantage, the MLL has, when, that was kind of one of the reasons why, Paul Rabel decided to split and create his own league. So it's an interesting dynamic. These leagues are competing, but they're still very different beasts, and we're kind of in a petri dish right now, trying to figure out what's working best for both leagues. And who knows, maybe we'll see a combination of both in the future. But right now, it's it's an interesting case study.
Yeah, I'm excited to see where both go, obviously, and it's so funny. You're not comparing apples to apples, right? They're different in a lot of ways, and we just have to see how this year plays out and going forward. That's why I'm so excited to kind of do this podcast and have all of our followers and listeners kind of have us along for the ride, pretty much, to see how both leagues go.
Yep, no, absolutely. The competition breeds the best, and I think more lacrosse is great for the sport. So I urge you fans out there of professional lacrosse, don't pick sides. You may like a different league more than the other one. That's fine. You're definitely allowed to do that. But let's not be turning on each other just because I like the PLL and you like the MLL more. Like, we're still lacrosse fans, and that community aspect of lacrosse is so important that if we start turning on each other, that's when it will go south. Like I said, obviously the PLL and the MLL are going to have their differences, and they're going to duke it out, whether it be on social media or, in the TV ratings, or, just in getting the best players. But that is a business competition. That is not anything to do with the fans. I think the fans should just be happy that we have such great products on the field and so many opportunities to watch games. I've never been more excited about professional lacrosse until I heard about the Premier Lacrosse League, and now I'm going to a few games. Obviously, I can't tour the country with them, and I'm actually still more excited to get to some Lizards games and possibly Bayhawks games when I come down back home. And so that to me is exciting too, because there's still stars in both leagues, and more lacrosse is better for the sport. So I think we've kind of touched on everything we want to touch on, unless you want to address the last elephant in the room of one particular MLL player, adding a little bit more fuel to the fire of the rivalry between the MLL and PLL.
Absolutely. I was really intrigued when I saw that John Grant Jr. was coming out of retirement to play as a player coach for the Denver Outlaws. And I tweeted out when I was watching the games the other day that he just so happened to be 3 points away from breaking the league's points record, which ironically was broken last year by Paul Rabel himself. So obviously no inside information from this side of the desk, obviously, but it's just intriguing that he came out and might be breaking that record fairly soon to get atop those record books. So just something, food for thought. I thought that was interesting, and it could have, obviously, I've met Mr. Grant before, and he's a fantastic person, and obviously he's doing a lot of cool things in the community in Denver, and obviously as a coach last year for them. So, but it was just thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, I know. It almost feels like a little bit of a vendetta, or maybe a Michael Jordan coming back, to get a few more championships. I mean, the guy's 44 years old, still playing at a high level, but it's definitely either got to be personal for him or some other motivation than just coming back for the love. Maybe it is the love of lacrosse. We don't know. We can't speak for him, but definitely an interesting storyline to watch this summer. So I think that's going to wrap us up. Obviously, this is the first of our podcast, but check out our website. We're going to have a lot of great content on there. We're going to focus on having some recaps, some highlights. We're also going to have some, feature human interest pieces as well. I got to speak with Scott Ratliff and Adam Gilman, who started the Give and Go Foundation, and they travel from country to country to kind of start up lacrosse programs, and talking to them was a phenomenal experience. So we'll have an article about that coming out soon. Just a lot of great stuff from our website. Follow us on social media. We love, hearing from you guys. We want to try to get some fan engagement going. We're going to try to do a segment called Fan Photos Friday, where you submit your photos earlier in the week, and we'll post the best ones on on Friday from you being at the game or watching the game. We're really going to try to just be really involved in the community. This isn't just something we're doing for us. We want to, grow the sport as well, and we think what's going on in professional lacrosse is great right now, and we like where it's headed. Our last segment is overtime. What are you looking most forward to this week, Adam?
A lot of cool games coming up. I'm really excited to see what Red Bull Stadium has to offer. DC, everything pretty much what the difference between the stadiums. Obviously, we talked about being in a football stadium with the overhead camera, the aerial shots. I'm super intrigued to see what not that much smaller, but a smaller venue does, and see what the types of crowds are going to be going forward.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I will be there on Sunday, so if you guys are listening to this and you see me, feel free to give me a shout. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the product on the field and some more professional lacrosse. It's going to be good. All right, so that does it for us. This was our first episode of Pro Lacrosse Talk. If you guys enjoyed us, feel free to subscribe. We'll be on iTunes, and then we'll be also on Stitcher pretty soon, if we're not already by the time you're listening to this. So feel free to subscribe. Give us a like on social media. Tell us what you thought and what we can improve on, and we'll go from there. But Adam, thank you for joining me on this, and this has been our first week of Pro Lacrosse Talk.